and its mouth was closed, but the two canines on top were just hanging out of the lips, so they were extremely long. And when it stood up on two legs again, and it kind of just opened up, and it put its hands out to the side like it looked like it was ready to, get into us.
The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his Codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours.
All right, everyone, hold on tight. We are hitting rewind. Back through the cryptid sightings, the UFO encounters, the mind-blowing theories, and all the weirdness in between. This one's a remix, an episode from the vault, a journey back to one of my favorite deep dives into the unknown. Same mystery, fresh perspective. This is Codega's Codex of Curiosities. Let's step back into the strange. And this episode was one of my favorite episodes. Oh, I'm just going to re-edit that. So I'm going to bring you on, or hang on, how am I going to do this? This episode was one of the best episodes I ever did. And coming back is Matt Emch from Planet 412. Matt, welcome to Codega's Codex of Curiosities. And who know better to help me introduce this video than the man himself who was on this interview, Matt Emch from Planet 412. So Matt, why don't you give a little introduction to yourself, and so that everybody who is watching it will know who you are.
Well, as always a pleasure, Rye. Thanks for having me. My name is Matt Emch, and I have my own channel. It's called Planet 412, and as you guys may or may not know, I had a crazy experience when I was 14 years old, all the way back in 1987. Me and three friends of mine had a Dogman attack us in the Youngstown steel mills. They were, abandoned, rusting hulks and machines back then. And we used to hang out back there, if you can believe it. And we had a supernatural Dogman attack. And that is what me and Rye are bringing up right now.
Yeah, that is exactly it. So, Matt, I want to say thank you so much for, just quickly dropping by and helping me with this intro into that interview. So thank you so much, Matt. And everybody, make sure you check out Matt's channel and stay tuned for this rewind episode.
Thanks, Rye. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on. My name is Matt Emch. That's how you pronounce my last name. It's kind of tough for some people. It's spelled E-M-C-H. It's German-Irish. You would be really surprised to see the mail that I've been getting my whole life and my family. People just kind of kill that last name. Emch. They add vowels and words like they think they're going to correct how it's said. So it's just pronounced Emch, E-M-C-H. I'm originally from Youngstown, Ohio, and if anybody doesn't know where that is, Youngstown, Ohio is exactly an hour in between Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Cleveland, Ohio. And 99% of the time, you're either a Pittsburgh Steelers fan or you're a Cleveland Browns fan. And the Emch household is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan household. But, I will leave football to the wayside now. And, where the experience happened was in Youngstown, Ohio. And it was actually in the downtown area. And if you go and you go on Google and and then you put down old steel mills of Youngstown, Ohio, specifically the blast furnace area that unfortunately the majority of everything is gone. I mean, you've got to imagine how old those steel mills were. They can't leave them up forever. They become dilapidated and dangerous, and people can get hurt very badly in old buildings like that. So they also made use of the steel and whatnot. And there's actually, and I always say this in all my interviews, I'm going to remember, I'm going to find out one day and just say, I know the name of that steel mill that's still working. And there's a newer one that has basically taken over everything, all of that old space that the old steel mills used to be in. And they basically just demolished that old blast furnace area, but I can't remember if I sent you guys a picture of that area.
I don't believe I got. Well, I don't believe I got a picture of it.
And well, what I'd like to do is I will, and I don't know if you'd be able to while we're doing this, if I send you the picture of that, if you would be able to throw that up onto the screen. And if you can't, you could just add it obviously later to the date. I just want people to be able to see what. Now, if you're looking at the picture and you can still hear me, what you guys are looking at is the old blast furnace in the downtown Youngstown area, of what and where my experience happened. And I wish the same would jump to
that
it.
is a. Oh, okay. Do you see it at all on our screen there?
I'm looking at it right now.
It should be. We should be sharing the screen. If not, I will have to try to edit this in after. But screen sharing. This is what we're seeing. So what we're seeing here is
Okay.
the blast furnace. We can see the old train there.
Can you guys
Definitely
hear
looks
me a little
very.
bit better? Can you hear me a little bit better now? Okay.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Great. I'm not gonna mess with those earbuds anymore. So what you're looking at on that picture is the exact area of where this event occurred. And if you look at from I would say if you were staring at those buildings, the blast furnaces, with them in front of you, starting from the left, going from the right. The cream colored building in the middle is the building that the event happened with me. Now, unfortunately, you can't get a look at the right side of the building because on the right side of the building is where there was a broken fire escape ladder, which will come into the story as I get into it. And then at the very top of the building, there was a flat kind of ceiling, not ceiling, the roof was flat. So you could get from the fire escape up to the fourth and top final floor on top of the roof. And there was no way out of there. Going down the fire escape, once you reach the second floor down to the first, there was no fire escape. So over years of dilapidation and just, nature taking back what, it owned, it rusted away and it fell away and it was laying at the ground in a big pile of metal. So that will come into the story. So as you can see how close the train is to all of these buildings, which is also a big part of this experience that occurred. And when we would go into this building, we had just got out of eighth grade, so there were four of us. There was a much bigger group of us that hung around, but this day there were four of us, the four closest friends of ours, and we had gotten out of eighth grade. It was the summer before we'd be entering high school, so we were doing what young guys do. We just would travel all around the areas, and we would go all over the place. And it just so happened one of my best friends literally lived right across the street from one of the openings that you could get into the old steel mills with. Now, if you Google Youngstown Warren, Warren Road, or Route 422 out of Youngstown, Ohio, that road will take you down past the steel mill that's there now and where it was and everything. And my buddy lived right across. So what we would do is we would meet at his house. We would go kind of across a very small 2-lane road. jump over a chain link fence, which would bring us onto the highway, which of course we shouldn't have been on. We would run as fast as we could across the highway, and we would automatically be into an area where we weren't allowed to be, but it would bring us into the steel mill area and the entrance to what we would use to get into it. So basically, it's just like some just kind of, I don't know, half stone, half gravel kind of makeshift roads that the vehicles would use to come up and out of and ferry, ingredients in and out. And we would go down, and once you reach this one part of it, you would have to kind of standing up, turn your feet to the side so you could go down a big gravel hill without falling. So if you understand what I'm saying, you turn your feet kind of to the side and you slow yourself down. And that's how we would get down. And it would take us roughly a half an hour from my friend's house to get to the building that we wanted to, this blast furnace area. And when you got to it, what we really liked about it, and what I have mentioned many times in other interviews, is what we liked about it was there were safety features, and one of the safety features was you would have to hop onto this outcropping of cement, like kind of like a, it's instead of there being stairs, there used to be stairs. Well, they were either purposely broken away or just fell away. So we would have to hop up on and roll ourselves up to get into this building. And we liked that because, number one, if there were people down there, we would know they were coming into the building. And first and foremost, the number one reason we chose this is because, as if with any big city, and Youngstown, Ohio is not a gigantic city by any means, but big enough that it had problems sometimes in these kind of areas with wild dogs. So you hear stories online about Detroit or in Baltimore and places down by the water where there are packs of wild dogs that 5 to 7 to 10 maybe even, that they help each other survive. And they will attack people and sometimes kill people and maul them. And, I always say this in kind of a semi-joking manner, but it's very serious. This isn't a hi, Fido. Come here, buddy. Let me give you a pet. That's not the kind of dogs these were. So we were very wary of where they were. And when we would go down there, even though we were 14, Youngstown, Ohio, numerous times through the years, and you could look this up online as well. Nothing that we're proud about, but probably 4 or 5 different times through the decades, Youngstown has been named Murder Town, USA. And per capita, we've gotten that unfortunate, name of, just something bad was going on throughout the country, and the size of our city and everything, just like I said, per capita, it just made us unfortunately number one in that area. A lot of gang violence going on during those times. That's when there was a lot of out on the West Coast, a lot of Bloods and Crips, and it even made its way all the way over to Northeast Ohio. So there was a lot of that going on. Youngstown, Ohio, also through the years has been known as a very, very strong related mob town. So people think the mobs don't exist, but they do, but very quietly. It was definitely very big with the mob back in those days. So one of the things also down in that steel mill area that you had to be wary of is, unfortunately, people would get rid of things down there, sometimes bodies, sometimes other unmentionables I won't get into. And, gangs would do the same thing. Sometimes they'd bring people down there and they would get rid of them and they would bury them. And, we found out about those things through the news, and also because, and I refuse, and I will always, I've said this on every interview I've ever done. 2 of my buddies out of the 4 of us, unfortunately, are no longer with us. They just, they're with our creator, whoever that may be. And one of them my best friend. We were all close, but one of them, he was my brother. He was my best friend, and I miss him immensely. And his dad, I won't say exactly what he did. Some people can figure it out, I'm sure, especially people that know me. And if they catch the video, they'll know who I'm talking about. But my best friend's dad was basically, in a nutshell, very involved with the city of Youngstown, with every facet of running the city, being involved with the police, and every other aspect. So he knew about everything that went on down there. And he would warn us about going down there, and about it's just dangerous. And sometimes he would make comments to us about, there's just things down there that I'm not going to get into. You guys just shouldn't be frequenting down there. Please don't go down there, promise me. And we were young guys, okay, sure, whatever you say. We would bring guns with us.
The typical. Yeah, we
Right.
won't do that. Let's go.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And we brought guns with us, and I'm sure that might freak a few people out. You get 14-year-olds, and we had guns, but again, we brought them down there for protection from, number one, first and foremost, these dogs that were frequenting the area, and God forbid any other horrible experience that could have popped up. Just to explain to you what we had was pretty sad. We had a 25 caliber automatic handgun that was so piss poor pathetic that when you shot it, the firing pin would come out as well. So it was very sad. There was a 22 caliber handgun that was somebody else's. That again was just very sad. It was guns that 14-year-olds got their hands on, so not too great. The one that I got my hands on happened to be my dad's, and he never learned of me doing this. I'm glad he never did, because I would have been tanned for it. He had a 38 that he would hide in an old cowboy boot in the back of his closet, and he thought he could fool everybody that no one would know, but my dad didn't wear cowboy boots, so that drew attention. And to a young boy that wants to get into everything in his dad's closet, a cowboy boot sure as heck grabbed my attention. And 38, 25, and a 22, and we had them with us almost all the time when we came. We never shot at anything. We never shot animals. We didn't try to hurt anybody or anything. We just brought them down there just in case. So we had these there with us also. Talking about this building that we frequented and why we made it our quote unquote home base was, again, because of the stairs not being there, but we liked the size of it. And if you walked into the building, the very first floor, you could walk to the center of the room and look up, and you could see 4 floors straight up to the top of the building. You couldn't obviously see out of the building because there was a final ceiling, covering the fourth floor, but you could see each floor going up from the middle of the room. And it was really large, and what we liked about it was we would have fires in there frequently, and there was never any shortage of things to burn down there. The majority of the things that we burned was, like what they use, like pallets, like wooden pallets. And it'd almost like we'd be having what football teams do before big games. They have big bonfires, and we would have bonfires. Right. But, it was just us kind of zoning out. And I've said this too in every one of my interviews. I'll figure it out someday. I'm going to make a point to find out what these things were. But obviously, for the steelmaking process, they made these for something. The only way I could describe the shape of these things is you think of old gladiators back in the day when they'd fight, and they had those shields that kind of would come and cover you and cover your sides. So you had a little bit of protection, right, on your shoulders and on the side. That's how they were shaped. They were shaped like that. There were hundreds of them in these buildings. We don't know what they were for. And because each part of the walls were open on the first floor, north, south, east, and west, you could see in this building whatever was going on. And we wanted that protected. So we took as many of these as we could, and we made makeshift walls at every opening. all four sides. And we were only able, I think, to make one more level. These things weighed probably 100 pounds. It took two of us to lift one. And we had a second row of them, and it only went so high. And we just wanted to block the light out so that when the train would come by, if they saw us in there, they would let police know. They would say, hey, you got people down there starting fires in buildings. And we never got caught before. But, this night we had made a pretty massive one. And like I said, we were really having a good time. It was the beginning of summer. We were just ready to have fun. And we had just started making a fire. And I remember this specifically. People talk about having supernatural and cryptid events happen in their lives. And I've heard so many over the years now where people say all of a sudden things just kind of get super quiet, and everything just seems to just stop moving and making noises, even things in the leaves like little animals just, so here we are inside of a big building with a giant fire. And you could hear at that time of the summer, tons of crickets outside and whatever else. Well, at one point, the four of us are just kind of staring at the fire. What people do, they kind of just zone and stare at fires. And I'll always remember, and we all talked about this, other than the fire making its noises, it really was kind of like, I don't know, it was almost like time kind of stopped for a second. And there was nothing else going on. And we all just kind of zoned and were staring. And I don't think that's overly important, except for the fact that the next thing that happened was we heard this pack of wild dogs. And they were coming our way on a mission. And they were flying, and we knew they couldn't get into the building. So we said, well, let's go walk out and see what they're doing. They can't get at us. We walked out onto this concrete outcropping. And when you look at that picture you guys had brought up, and you see how close that the tracks were to the buildings, just on the other side of those tracks were giant mounds of, in the steel making process, I don't know if you've ever heard of coke. And it's just a material that they use to make steel. I don't know exactly what it's made of. It looks kind of like dirt, basically, and yeah, so you know what I mean? They had gigantic mounds of these things that from either way probably went miles. And we had it, like I said, if you walked outside of our building, we had this outcropping. Probably 10 feet from the building was the railroad tracks. And just beyond that was huge piles of this material. Well, these dogs, I'm sorry. Slag. So, there you go. That's another great explanation of what I've heard it called as well. So tons of it out there. The dogs, usually if they would see us, they would always at least stop and growl at us or bark at us or something. They didn't look at us. They didn't even give us thought. They ran by our building, and just as they got past the building we were in, they turned, crossed, went over the railroad tracks, up and over the other side of this material. And immediately, within 1 to 2 seconds, we start hearing what sounded like, and we thought the dogs themselves were fighting with each other, that they had started to attack each other, that they just got into it. So we're like, holy cow. And it was mass hysteria. It was, you're hearing biting and yelping and everything. And within a couple seconds after that, we start to realize that there's not just this pack of dogs on the other side of this material. There's something else over there, and that's what they're attacking. And the noise was so much more deep and loud that we started to hear it, and it overwhelmed the noise of these other dogs. And remember, there was 6 or 7 pretty nice sized dogs, wild dogs, and this was much louder and deeper and sounded almost kind of like when you hear a big cat in a zoo make a noise, and it just everybody in the zoo will stop and kind of look around when you hear that. And just at that moment, you hear a couple yelps, and not one, but two of these wild dogs comes being thrown like a human of giant stature had grabbed one of the dogs and decided to just throw it. Well, one's behind was in the air, upside down, coming flying towards our direction. Went over this mound, hit the ground, rolled, jumped up, and limped away. Another one had hit the top of this mound of coke and material and sent shards of it in the air, and it hit the ground. And I'm a huge animal lover and a dog lover. I have two dogs. One's laying next to me as I'm giving this interview, and had a really bad cut from its shoulder, and it went all the way down its side. It had like it was flayed open, like something had just cut into it. And I don't know if it died. I hope it didn't, but I don't see, unless it got some type of help from a human being, a doctor, that it would have lived through what I saw. You could see muscle and everything, and it was pouring, and it slowly limped away. And then two more get kind of tossed over the hill. They hit the top of it, and it's just mass hysteria, and you're hearing screaming and yelling and yelping, and knowing this pack is just, they're being taken behind the woodshed. And so we were inside looking at the fire. So the fire was inside of the building. When we heard the dogs, we went outside. So we went past our makeshift wall and walked out, kind of like on a patio. It's almost like shaped like a patio, but there were no stairs up and down. It just kind of jutted out the side of this building. You could tell its length from the outside of this building to where the railroad tracks were. That's why the railroad tracks were so close, because they would pull up to these buildings and be able to dump or take whatever they needed from said, load. And it was just over the other side of this. So we were probably within, as the crow would fly, I would say maybe 20 feet from where all this insanity was taking place. But because of this mound of material, we couldn't see what was going on other than these dogs getting thrown. Two more come running over. They decided they were out of there, and they took off. And we're just looking at each other, jaws hitting the ground, like what the heck just happened. I'm like I said, a very sensitive person with animals, so I just kept saying, that poor dog, that poor dog. And my one buddy to my left and just behind me says, "Guys, what is that over there? What is that?" And at once, all four of us turned our heads and looked to our right. And just where the dogs had decided to turn and go up and over this mound of material, some kind of gigantic creature crawls up to the top of this mound. And I kid you not, and I will always say this, and there's people out there, I've seen comments that said, I've seen this interview before, I've heard this gentleman's interview before, and I've had nothing but thank God, and I appreciate people giving me nice compliments, and it means I'm relaying what happened to me and the light that it happened, because as far as I can't prove to everybody out there, I'm not psychic. I can't put in your minds and tell you all that this is 100% proof. I can't do that. But I'm telling you, it happened. It happened to me and all four of my friends. And what we were looking at, for all intents and purposes, was so giant and so large that it looked fake. It looked like it just couldn't exist. And it was every bit as big of we've talked about over the years, the animal that we can compare what this thing looked like. And its shape was every bit the same type of build of a polar bear. So where you take a polar bear versus, say, a Kodiak grizzly bear. Kodiak grizzly bear is basically a walking boulder. Just, just real big and circular and giant. Yes, he'll stand up and be big. Polar bear is a different shape. That's a different creature altogether. Very lean, very long in the limbs. The arms and the legs are very long, but strong looking and lean. And this thing was built more, though, of what a polar bear looked like, but longer, bigger, wider, much more muscular. The hair was not extremely long at all. In fact, I'll always say this, the hair was probably an inch, if an inch and a half. I'm really pushing it because it was not long. So that gave us a very good view of the musculature of this creature, and it was impressive. And you could see everything about it. This thing was made for one thing, and that was to be, in my opinion and my friends' opinions over the years, the most ultimate predator that, in my opinion, I've I know I haven't seen a lot of things that are out there in the world, and I am not in any way, shape, or form a scientist or a professional on these things. I had a long experience that occurred that gave me and my friends a look that I think not many people have had the opportunity to have over the years. Doesn't make me an expert, and I'll never claim I am, so I'm not. But I did see some things that many have not seen. And this thing was watching these dogs run away, and it kind of had its head lowered, and it was kind of like in a stance of, he was thinking maybe about taking off after them and finishing the job. But then what happened next, and I'll always say the same thing here, some people might think this is funny. We didn't find it funny at all. This creature lifted its leg, and it looked every bit a combination of a giant wolf, like a dire wolf I've seen pictures of, and of a German Shepherd mix. This dog lifted its leg, and it started doing business. It started urinating, and again, people might think that's something funny. It wasn't funny, because the size of this creature, again, was so large. We just kept saying it. It's in my head, at least, I can keep saying, I'm going to be waking up any second. This can't be happening. Nothing like this can exist. This can't be real. I'm going to wake up in my bedroom, and I'm just going to go, wow, what a dream. I'll tell my buddies about. But it kept happening, and it was real. And it was urinating, and when it urinated, so you've got an animal so large, it actually makes polar bears look small. So the urine stream that came out of this animal hit the top of this pile it was standing on, and just pieces of this coke and other things, and gravel and whatever other was mixed in, just start flying in the air, and you can hear the stream and everything. And then, my one buddy who had noticed it first, who was to my left and just behind me, he started losing it. That freaked him out as well, and he started stepping back, and I think he lost his footing, and he fell back into that makeshift wall that we had created, which created the most jarring and loud sound of steel on concrete. And now all of a sudden, this that had been giving these packs of dogs its full attention stopped and snapped its head over and saw, oh, now I have four other things over here watching me. And the first impression that I got, and then after we talked about it years later, was surprise. Didn't know we were there at first. Didn't expect us to be there. And when realized we were there, was definitely not happy about that fact. And it looked at us, and its head was low, and the short hair it even had on its neck kind of was raised, so kind of was getting that angry kind of predatorial thing going on. And it looked at us, and the very, very first thing I will always remember, and I will always take to my grave, and I see it in my sleep sometimes to this day, is it had eyes that not only were just giant eyes physically, they were glowing. And I'm telling you now, I've heard many, and you can imagine having this experience when I was 14, all the years that I have been researching these things now, and all the different stories I've heard. And I will always say this about myself. I look at these in two different groupings. I look at things as experiences, and I look at things as stories. That is my way of being respectful to people who I'm not too sure that they're telling maybe the truth. So I'm not going to call anyone a liar, because anything is possible, especially after what I have seen. But when I say experience, and you know me now, you'll know that I'm buying everything that I'm hearing. And I've heard some experiences over the years, and some similarities about things that occurred with us. And I've heard the eye thing, and its eyes were an orange, yellow, amber kind of color that was so bright that there is, without a doubt, and this is why I believe, and I've talked to Josh Turnover of the Paranormal Roundtable. I'm going to his conference this weekend, by the way, and I'm excited. He's a great guy, and I was on his show. We spoke about our experiences, and we both are of the mind of. I'm not going to speak for him too much, but we did agree on one thing, and we both think that there's something supernatural going on with this creature. The eyes definitely signal that for me first, because it was not eye shine. There is no eye shine on the planet Earth bright enough to have made these eyeballs glow the way that they did. So there's some kind of internal something going on in this creature that shine these lights, and its eyes, always say this, I wish I could have saw the natural, maybe daytime color of what its eyes might look like, because I've heard stories also and experiences through the years of people seeing them in the woods during the day and not seeing the amber color or anything. And I've heard every color under the sun of a human being's eyes having color like blue and gray, and even some humans I've heard have red eyes. And I've heard the same thing about these. I did not get that opportunity to see what its eyes really look like. I saw whatever it was doing at night and why they were glowing. And you could see the pupils. You could see, when you look at an eyeball, you can see each different layer of and I'm being very generalized here for people, different layers of circles in the eyes. And they were so large that when it was looking at the four of us, it didn't need to turn its head to let us know which one of us it was looking at. Its eyes were so large and so bright, and the pupils and everything were so giant. I knew when it looked at me. I knew, and you felt like it was looking through you. And then so did my friends. They all did. And then what occurred next changed my life forever, changed my friends' lives forever. And I had a paradigm shift. And what happened is this thing went from 4 legs to standing on 2. And it stood on 2 legs like it was born to do it. It was as comfortable on 2 legs as it was on 4. And that's when the blankety blank hit the fan, because all 4 of us in our own manners all just realized that everything we had been seeing on TV and movies and comic books and the library, our whole lives being told as mythology and fake and movies and everything, is now right standing in front of us, real, breathing, looking at us, and then all of a sudden gives out a growl that I have never to this date felt anything the like of. And you hear all the stories of infrasound, and you hear the stories of Bigfoot and just lions and tigers and big alligators. You watch a video of an alligator in the water and they give their infrasound growl, and all the water kind of hops around it, and it was very similar. It gave a very loud growl, and every one of us was affected by it. And you could feel this vibration go through you. It went through my chest, it went out my back. And I felt what happened to me first. I felt it in my thighs. I felt it in my knees, down into my calves, into my ankles and feet. And I thought for sure, 100%, I was going to be going down on my knees and not be able to stand up any longer. I liken it to, you have a nightmare, you have something chasing you in your nightmare, and your legs don't work, and then you just keep running. And this was the way I felt, and it was real. And my best friend to my right basically told me he said, my legs aren't working, I can't move. My two other buddies, the one who had really started losing his mind, he was down on, I believe, on his right or left knee, and he said, I feel like I'm going to pass out, I'm going to throw up. And then my other buddy, who lived across the street from the steel mill, said the same thing as well. He was bent over, and he was gagging and dry gagging and saying, I feel like I'm going to pass out. And this thing just, kind of just opened up its chest, and it looked at us, and I never saw any claws. So I'm going to say this from the beginning. I heard noises from the beginning to the end of large claws at different times. I never got to see any. But what I will say is when this thing stood up on two legs, it had dog-shaped legs, had very thick bones going down to its feet or paw legs. This thing opened itself up, and it's from the waist up, very human-like, humanoid shaped. No, you hear people say they've seen Bigfoot. They look like giant bodybuilders. I've never seen a Bigfoot, so I can't say what it looks like. This thing's muscles were so giant and so overblown large and long. There's no human being on the planet that you can compare what I saw to. So again, the fake thing kept coming back, and like, this can't be real what I'm looking at. And its arms were so long that it went past its knees. It had raccoon-shaped fingers, hands. So, I'm 6'4", I'm 272. My hands are very small compared to how big this dog thing was. And it had very long fingers, but they reminded me, as I've through the years looked at things, and the best description I can put to date is they just look like giant raccoon hands. Guaranteed there were claws connected. I didn't see them. Guaranteed they were there. Its arms again were just so long, went down to its ankles, its fingers, giant muscles protruding all over the chest. It definitely was a male because of what happened on the mound.
Yeah.
It was a male. Let's just leave it at that. And it had giant lats coming up. It's almost like a demon having neck. It just was just from here to here, just all muscle. And at that point, as we're getting this look at this thing, it takes a step toward us. And my buddy, who was starting to lose it real bad, he'd seen enough. He turned around, he ran inside. Everybody else followed suit. And we started running up the stairs to the third floor. Now, to explain, like I told you, there was a lot of dilapidation in these buildings. There would be concrete that would fall sometimes from the top floor that would just miss you, and we shouldn't have been in there, but we were. So going from the first floor to the second floor, there was like a 4-stair area that was gone. So the concrete had fallen away, but there was just pieces of rebar sticking out. So we had to run up the stairs, jump over this, 4-piece of stair missing, gone, and we went up to the set from the second to the third, and there was some missing, but it's very small. So it wasn't real hard to get up there. And like I said, there were 4 floors. We could have gone up to the 4th floor, but we didn't. We just kind of stopped on the 3rd. And my one buddy just was losing it. He had gone completely postal. He's screaming and crying. I want to get out of here. God, please, God, save us. I want to go home. I want, he's saying all kinds of things. Finally, he's just being so loud that, I come up behind him and I wrap my hand around his mouth. And I didn't realize I grabbed him so hard. And I grabbed him so hard that I actually lifted him up off the floor. His feet were dangling and I had my hand here and I'm trying to shut him up. My other friends are saying, shut up, shut up, shut up. Finally, his eyes are rolling. They're like, Matt, he can't breathe. So I put him down. I slowly start to release. I say, listen, I'm going to let you go. If you start making more noises, we're going to put you out for good. Do you hear me? This thing's going to come in here. It's going to kill us. Are you going to shut up? Just as he gave us the yes, we hear thump, thump. Nails on concrete noise meant only one thing. This thing's coming in the building. Now, as you know, building big fires, a human being walks by a big fire, the shadow that gets thrown on a wall or trees or whatever, the size is 10, 20 times bigger than what's there. So just imagine we're looking at a creature in real time outside just a couple minutes before then that was so big our brains are telling us it can't be real. Now we're looking at first just its shadow is getting thrown on the wall of this giant building. And then its head comes in and, as it makes its way through into the 1st floor, I always say this too, I liken this to when you're watching a train moving. A train comes through an area and it just keeps coming. It's just so long. It's like, when am I going to see the end of this thing? Basically, the mindset that we had is, when's the end of this thing going to stop? When's it going to stop being so large? When's it going to end? And finally got in and it was back on all 4s and we finally got a really good look again. We were up on the 3rd floor looking down and we were probably only, I would say 15, 20 feet max from this thing. It did not know we were at the point, because when you would walk into the middle of these rooms, there was a half concrete wall. So that would keep anybody that was walking around either of these floors safe from falling in the hole that was in the center of these rooms. So we're standing at this half wall looking down at it and just, frozen, horrified. It's looking around and you start hearing noises, and it's not raining and it's not the sound of wood burning or popping. What we start to realize is that there is salivation pouring out of this thing's mouth, and not just little strings and whatnot. We're talking thick pieces of salivation that's being almost like a hose is turned on, and it's breaking and popping and hitting the ground. And you think of how a real heavy thunderstorm on concrete sounds on a real heavy rain day. That's the noise that this was being portrayed at that moment. And it's just pouring out of its mouth, which signaled only one thing to me at that moment. This thing is hungry. It's deciding I'm about to feed or kill. And I started really at that moment believing that we're going to die here. This could be the end of our lives. And I'm starting to get that real sense of this might be our moment. This might be our we might meet our maker here right now. And, we had no idea we had these guns. Let me put this in there real quick about the guns and I'll bring them up again. I'm glad we didn't remember we had them, because first off, just even if we could have even named them would have been a miracle with the fear that was going through us. If we could have managed to shoot at it, I think number one, the sound, number two, if we had managed even just to hit it with something, would have made it that much angrier that it would have been even more of a gore fest of whatever could have occurred. So I'm glad we didn't remember we had them, because they would not have stopped this thing in the bit. Not the 38 for sure. Nothing we had would have done anything but make it mad. So we're staring at this thing, and it's salivating. It's looking around. And you start noticing how short the fur on this thing is, and it was all black, super jet black, very slick, almost so short and fine that it was almost like it was being groomed, like somebody was taking it somewhere and paying to have it groomed. Obviously it wasn't being, but it was just, the hair was just so short and so well taken care of. It either licked itself all the time, or I don't know how. It was just super short. It was in great shape. It was slicked back. It had a white stripe that at first I had thought maybe it was some of the glare from the fire. It had a white stripe going from the back of its neck all the way down its back, the middle of it, to its tail. And its tail was very long and thick. Did not have a traditional wolf's tail. If you look at what like maybe a cougar or a tiger's tail are, they're more or less like, that kind of thickness, and it's real tight fur. It's not wiry or anything. There was none of that going on. This thing was just very tight and slick, and it just looked like it could just move like liquid glass or metal. It just moved beautifully, and when it was moving, even though it was scary, it was a beautiful sight to see. Is when you see big cats, you see big cats walk, you see their scapula come up, how right here on their backs, and you see those rays. Well, this thing had gigantic scapula, and every time it raised, it had the most muscle wrapped around it. So you were seeing muscles that were clenching and moving, and as it was coming up, it wasn't just the scapula bone that was moving. You're seeing muscle everywhere on this thing that I had never seen on any animal. Just the anatomy of this thing was so detailed. And this is something that happened that gave me and my friends, and I saw it, and one of my other buddies saw it. We had to explain it to two other of my friends what we saw. Only happened 2-3 seconds, but it was enough that gave me the idea of why I believe there's something supernatural going on. It walked by the fire. And if you've ever seen on videos about the sun, how there's magnetic storms on the surface of the sun, and there's cyclones and things that kind of just jump out, and the shapes that come from the magnetic storms that are real kind of cool to watch. Well, what happened was its front left leg, paw, hand, whatever the heck you want to call that thing, when it hit the floor near the fire, what happened was you got a miniature version of like this little tornadic kind of magnetic storm kind of thing pop up from the ground around the fire, and its left front leg, however you want to call it, for just 2 seconds blinked out, almost like it cloaked out, almost. And I don't want to say exactly like the Predator from the Arnold movie, but it was like it. You could still see that the leg was there, the hand and that was there, but it was almost like there was a cloaking going on. Something happened. And it was enough to notice that, even though it was 2-3 seconds and just like that, and it was over, but enough to say, what the heck was that? And it was real. And then it stopped, and all of a sudden it stopped. It sniffed the air, and then it looked right up at us, and it saw us. As soon as it saw us, it stood back up on 2 legs, and it was every bit bigger than it was outside. Now, it could have been the same size as it was outside because we were in the dark. Now we're in a completely lit up, fire lit room. It looked bigger now. Now, let me explain something. We didn't go back to this place for years, but we did go back years later, and we wanted to get an idea of the size of this creature because we wanted to see if, we brought measurement, we brought a measuring tape and just try to get a little idea. Now, in this building, there were four, in each corner of the room, there were four gigantic concrete pillars that were obviously like load bearing pillars that they started at the very base. God knows how far they went into the ground, went all the way up the length of the whole building. There were four of them. Well, this thing, when it smelled us and it stood back up, it stood up and you couldn't see. And we measured it, and these were every bit 4 to 5 feet wide. When it stood up in front of one of it, you could not see the sides of this concrete pillar. So it was every bit between 4 to 5 feet wide that way. And then its height, each floor we measured, the ceiling was between 14 to maybe 15, 16 feet in height. Its ears being completely upright like this. And I also need to add this. Its ears, when it was coming around the room, you could tell it was listening. It was looking for us. And its ears were kind of cupped at one point, and they were turning, and you could tell where it was listening. Looked very Doberman Pinscherman looked. And I'm working with Sibylla Irwin, if you know who she is. And we're making a rendering. We're working really hard on a rendering of what I saw, and I'm excited to be able to show everybody what we saw. So when that's ready, everybody will know. Very disturbing, and when it stood up, it looked at us, and it bared all of its teeth. Huge canines that even when, I had forgotten to mention this, when it saw the dogs at the beginning running away, it wasn't growling at them or anything. It was just watching them run away after it dealt them some pain. And its mouth was closed, but the two canines on top were just hanging out of the lips. So they were extremely long. And when it stood up on two legs again, and it kind of just opened up, and it put its hands out to the side like it looked like it was ready to, get into us, it growled at us again. And something that always stood out to me was, I told you, nothing really bushy about this thing hair-wise. But the one thing hair-wise that was kind of odd and stood out was when it looked up at us, it had these tufts of hair that came out from the neck area, and they were spade shaped, and it was like these two big spades. But when it was down on all fours, it was kind of compacted around its neck. But when it turned its head up, and those muscles kind of flattened out in the neck and everything, that hair just kind of popped out, and you could see it looked like you were looking at a spade playing card. That was the shape of the hair coming off of its neck. And it growled at us again. And we felt vibration go through the floor. We felt a little go through our bodies, but we realized, because, and I know this is why it didn't have its effect on us the second time like the first, is because I had mentioned to you, when you entered the center of the room, you had that half concrete wall there. And we truly believe it blocked a lot of this second growl, because it was down on the first floor. We're up on the third. It's looking up at us. So there's a lot of concrete between that growl and us now. So we felt a little bit. I felt it in my head, but kind of felt through the ground, kind of vibrate, which is freaky too. That something that can growl that loud vibrates, concrete in a giant blast furnace building. But nobody got sick. And it ended up turning its head and looking to the right, and I got immediately horrified because I knew what it was looking at. It was looking at the stairs to its right. And it went back from two legs to four, and it started running for the stairs. And my buddy, who I had, almost caused to pass out, and he starts he has completely lost it. He left us. He was gone. He was postal, running in circles, screaming, "God, somebody help us, please." Like I said, the only way out of the third floor was either to run up to the fourth floor, and I don't even know if the door going out to the roof was able to be opened. I can't remember that. So the only other way out of that third floor was to go out to the fire escape and go up to the roof, because as I explained to you before, the rest of it had broken away and gone down. So if you would have jumped, we probably would have died. So that wasn't something we weren't looking to do. So my one buddy's running in circles like someone that's had a complete mental and utter breakdown, which you can't blame him. My other buddy who lived across the street had made a beeline for that doorway to run up to the roof of the building. He made up his mind where he was going to go. The other two that were left were me and my best friend. I was stuck in my spot. I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. I was having that. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what moment to call it, because I didn't have my life flash before my eyes. What I did see, I apologize if I get a little emotional. What I did start to see was, I have a big family. We're really close. There's 5 kids in my family. My mom and dad are no longer here. I have a great near-death experience I'll share with you guys in the future too, that I'd love to share, but they're no longer here. And what I saw was, I saw my mom and dad's face. I saw my other siblings. I saw my damn mean-ass dog that we used to have when I was a little kid, the meanest little Lhasa Apso that bit us and hated us. And I thought of my little shitty dog, excuse my language. And I thought, I'm going to die. This is where my life is going to end. I was getting ready to go to, it's called Youngstown Ursuline High School. It's a private Catholic school that is considered one of the best private schools in the United States. What they're really known for, number one, obviously, is academics. Number two, their athletics are second to none. I was a football player in high school and college, and my whole family went to that school, and my dad was a football player there, and I wanted to be, I wanted to be there and be part of my dad's legacy. And I felt that it was all gone. And so I have to explain, when this thing was running up the stairs, it was coming up quick. So these thoughts are going through my head really quick. It wasn't like time froze. Hearing screaming behind me, seeing my friend leave the doorway, I knew where he was going. My friend to my right, my best friend, was looking at me. He had tears running down his face, looking at me like maybe I had an answer for what we were going to do, and I had nothing. And I saw it coming up the stairs, and I knew once it reached the top of the stairs from the second to the third floor, there's 2 people it's going to come to first, me and my best friend. And I started thinking which one of us it's going to start, and we're all going to watch each other die, and it's going to be horrible death. I was froze. I was frozen solid. We might be 14. We might have been big boys. We were babies. And we were looking at something that should not exist. And it wasn't coming to scare us, because let me point something out, and I'm sure you guys doing what you do, and you do an amazing job, by the way. I love your show. You guys do it the right way, the way that I like to do it, and listen to people do. And I'm starting my own channel eventually soon. And I have to say, yours is of the type that I'm going to do it after, because you guys do it right. And I mean, and you look at all the avenues, and you don't just look at things and say, sure, of course, everything can happen. You guys look at things scientifically, and you look at things realistically. And I like your discussions that you have. You guys are real about things. And, this thing was coming up the stairs, and thought that was it. And, it moved really, really special and quick. And what happened next, why I truly believe that there was intervention that occurred that night, was because we had no way out. No way out. We could not run past this thing. We could not get off the building. If we jumped, we were dead. There was divine intervention, because what happens next, as it was halfway up from the second to the third floor, and I could see it coming. Its teeth were bared. It was looking right at either me or him. We were standing right next to each other, and just frozen solid. And I hear the most beautiful sound to this day I've ever heard, and I hear ka-clink, 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 a train on a track coming. It's coming past the building that we're in. Now, let me tell you something. And all of the times that we've been in that building, and all of the times that we've had fires in that building and smoke billowing out of it, we have never once had any train pull their horn. Now, either it was divine intervention causing this guy to do this, he saw the fire from the big one we had going, or what I actually have run by the guys quite a few times through the years, and again, two of them are no longer here to talk about it, but we also wondered, was being up so high in a train, he could have looked into the building with all that light and seen the stairs easily and what was coming up those stairs. And he might have seen this thing coming up and just laid on that horn for us. Now, my other buddies think that they just saw the fire because the train didn't slow down. He never stopped, never came back. He laid on it for a good while, caused this thing to stop, to look up at us, look back at us, turn around and head down the stairs. And this is another part that I think was going on, as it started heading out of the building. Now, let me tell you something. I've heard stories of shadow people in bedrooms, of people seeing things in the woods where they're so dark, they're so black that they actually suck the light from things. That's how black this thing was. And when it turned around and it started running out, it ran like a panther, like a cougar, like, that really beautiful, almost liquid kind of metal, kind of oily greasiness. The way it runs is just beautiful. The way that it can move is like awe-inspiring. Of course, it was scary as hell, but looking back on it, it just moved unlike something that it just couldn't have been real. And it hit the second floor and went for the first floor staircase. And by the way, when it had run up the first floor where those stairs had been missing, it jumped over those like they were maybe this long, so it had no problem. And what occurred next was it went from being completely seen, 100% animal looking. You could see all of its joints, all of its movements, its tail, its ears, everything, to all of a sudden a streak of black that left the building so fast that it could not have been anything but supernatural. So it was 1 second, it was there as like you two, I'm looking at you, to a streak that left the building in the blink of an eye, no noise, nothing, gone. And we just start screaming, God help us, somebody save us, you've got to get us out of here, it's going to kill us, screaming till we're losing our voices, and you just hear the train getting farther and farther away, and the fear starts setting back in that it's going to come back in. It's going to come back in. It's going to get us. And we had got ourselves back together as a group, and my other buddy, he was gone. He wasn't speaking anymore. He was just screaming, please, we can't go outside. It's going to come get us. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And everything. And we had sat up on the third floor for maybe an hour before we started saying, it's time, we have to start doing something. The longer we wait here, it's going to come back. It's going to come back. So we made our way down to the second floor. We were maybe down there somewhere in between, I'm going to say 25 to 40 minutes before we decided now it's time to get down to the first floor and time to get out. Now, right then, my buddy who had lost it is screaming and telling us we have to stay the night there. We can't leave there. It's going to be waiting for us outside. It's there. Don't you know? It's just waiting for us. Finally, I grabbed my friend and I apologized to him many times over the years. And he said, I don't blame you. I don't hold you any ill will. And I grabbed him and I looked at him and I said, you listen to me. We're either going to leave with or without you. You're going to die alone in this building with that creature, or you're going to take a chance with all of us and we're going to make it back to our buddy's house and we're going to live together. So you make up your mind, because we're leaving your ass if you don't stop acting like this. And he's screaming, no, no, crying. And like I said, he checked out. He was, there's no more reality for him anymore. He just wants mommy and daddy. He wants to go home in his bed and hide under his bed or whatever. And he just couldn't handle it. And then we start leaving the building and he's yanking on us. And I grabbed him and I grabbed him by his face. And I used some very, very foul language. And I'm not going to repeat myself. And I told him, you're going to die and you're going to be alone, or you're going to live and you're going to come with us. And I turned around and my other buddy turned around and I said, now hold on to our shirts and we're getting out of here. And we had remembered we had our guns and we had them out. And again, we knew they were pathetic compared, but we had something. And we had these old, 2 or 3 C battery, flashlights that lit maybe 2 feet in front of you. And we have these out and then we're, climbing down. And let me explain something as well. Leaving this building, having no stairs climbing up. I know when you had to jump up to get into it, you could go down and look underneath this concrete outcropping and you could look way back into the building. So this thing could have easily just been sitting right down, hiding and waiting for us to drop down and just, hi guys. And that was one of the scariest moments, was leaving that building right then. And we start hightailing it. And every noise we heard, every leaf from the wind blowing, every piece of gravel that you kicked with your foot, turning around, looking around, is that it? Is it there? Is it here? And we finally make it back to that point where that gravel, we had to turn our feet to go down. Well, going back up, only one way back up. On all fours. You ain't going back. Yes, sir. You're crawling back up. So we would always make fun of each other when we would have to go back. You would always slide down, and each one of us would always start to slide back, and we'd laugh and we'd think it was fun. This wasn't funny that time, because it was happening because we were more freaked out. So we were trying even harder to get up. We're exhausted, sweating. You couldn't breathe. We barely had any air left. Guys are sliding. Is it behind? Is it behind us? Guys are screaming, oh my God, is it behind us? We're turning and looking and got our flashlights and no, just come on, let's keep them. Every once in a while, we're kind of helping each other get past a certain tough point. And finally, after I'd say 20 minutes, we got to the top of this, and me and my one buddy had got up there first and laid on our stomachs and stretched our arms out to help grab our buddies who were having time, the hardest time getting to the top. We helped pull them up, and we were so exhausted. And just at that moment, we hear that pack of wild dogs off in the distance. And you want to talk faces turning shades of white. I'm telling you, ghosts have nothing on the face, our faces turning white. We could have lit up a dark room. We were so white as a ghost. We thought that meant that was it signaling this thing. We did not see the dogs. We just heard them. We didn't see it again, thank God. Finally, we made it. we barely made it across the highway and almost got hit. My one buddy almost got hit by a car because our legs were shaking so bad. We were so exhausted from climbing up and getting back. We finally made it, and we got up on my buddy's porch, and his family wasn't there. And I'll always remember this. This might seem like non-consequential, but I always remember that I went and I grabbed his hose that was sitting there, and I just just kept pouring water on myself and drinking, and I was drinking so much water, I got sick. And next guy took it. We all just soaked ourselves, and we just sat there for maybe an hour, hour and a half, and we just sat there and stared across the street towards the area. We couldn't see the exact area from where we were, but we just sat and we just stared, and no one talked for like an hour and a half. And my one buddy that had the most problem with it didn't speak for 2 weeks after it happened. He had to get some major psychological help. I had some religious stuff that went down with me. I'm half Lebanese, so and again, obviously, I'm giving my full name. I'm telling you where I grew up, where this happened. I'm not afraid to admit this stuff happened. It was real. I belong to St. Mary's Church in Youngstown, Ohio, which is a Maronite Rite Catholic church, which is mostly for Lebanese and anyone else that's welcome, of course. And I went to my priest and I told him what happened, and I told him, Father, I have something that occurred to me and my friends that I don't know how to deal with this anymore, and I'm not sleeping and I'm not eating and I'm having nightmares every night, and I'm almost almost afraid to leave my house anymore. And I told him what happened, and instead of me getting what I thought I might get of Matthew, you probably saw, something you weren't too sure about. I got, Matthew, you need to understand something, my son. There are things in this world that people have no idea exist. They think that are meant in myth and lore and books. And he mentioned comic books, which, like I told him, that's funny you mentioned that. I grew up from as young as I could hold a book reading comic books. And he said, there are things in mythology that people need to understand. We are taught in the church this. He said, there is always truth to mythology. It is not all made up. It is not all for just entertainment purposes. He says, do you think that, in Italy, with all of the church and belief that goes on, that possession is fake and it's made up for entertainment purposes? He said, Matthew, I've seen some exorcisms. And he said, I've seen things that I don't ever want to see again, ever. He said, there are things out there and that you have got to see them, some of them. And there's more than you can realize. And sometimes they enter our part of the veil. And this is why this word, the veil, means so much to me, is because he said to me, the way that they are taught and that they talk about a lot of times is that there is a veil, a sheet almost, that separates our world from all kinds of other places that our minds as human beings can't even grasp. And he says sometimes our bodies can reach a level of frequency, and because everything has a frequency on this planet, and we can cross that frequency and that veil, and we can enter into these spaces at that time when other things that we don't know exist just so happen are crossing right when you are. And he said, sometimes good things happen, sometimes nothing happens. Most of the time they go the other way and you go the other way. And then other times, sometimes the most horrific things happen. And he mentioned, that there have been deaths that have occurred. And he said, I really recommend that you and I spend some time together. And I spent probably over a couple year period. I saw him probably every other week for about 4 years, talking to him about these things. And I've learned a lot of stuff that I haven't shared. And there's some really crazy stuff out there. And I'm not going to get into it now, and I'll share it for later. But, go ahead.
I'm kind of scared listening to the story. This is probably the most intense, frightening story I've ever heard.
Well, yeah, I've always had a problem, and this is something that I will also delve into with my new channel someday, into other interviews, which I would love to work with you guys in the future again and things like that. And I
100%.
will share, like, I had an experience happen in Beaver Creek State Park about a month and a half to 2 months ago. Just recently, that some crazy stuff happened. Yeah. Ohio is very supernaturally, it's got some stuff going on there, and I'll share that as well. But one thing that we decided with each other is that when we went to see each of our groups of parents, that we would all four be there to support each other, because if there's a one of us, you're crazy. What were you guys talking about? Now it's all four of us are together, and we went to each one of our groups of parents. Now, my buddy who didn't speak for 2 weeks, um, his parents just thought that he had a lot going on in his life and had a nervous breakdown. He thought maybe we saw, his dad thought kind of what my dad thought at first, that we saw maybe a big black bear and it tried to kill us, and he just lost his shit. His mom didn't believe any of it. She didn't want to even talk about it. She left the room. My mom, basically the same thing. She said, honey, you guys saw something. You didn't know what it was. That's not what you saw. They don't exist. I'm not. And she just walked out of the room, which was disappointing as well. My other buddy's mom and dad just said, you guys are nuts. You guys, what were you guys doing? Smoking weed or eating, eating mushrooms or something? We're 14-year-old kids. We weren't doing drugs or drinking alcohol. We were good kids. And I'm not saying you're not a good kid if you do that. I'm just making a point. We were athletes. We were very serious about things in our bodies, and we weren't doing things like that. So they didn't want to hear nothing. And I thought maybe his mom and dad would believe a little more, because he was Hispanic, and his mom and dad would tell us some supernatural stories. And I thought, man, if anybody would give us maybe some love on that, it would be them. They had nothing to say about that, or maybe it was purposely. Maybe they didn't want to say, yeah, we know, so they didn't. So only two people. My best friend's mom also didn't want to have nothing to do with it. She didn't even want to talk about it. She didn't want to hear about it. Only two people who gave any kind of credit we saw anything. Number one was my dad. He thought we saw a black bear, which are very far and few between in Ohio. There's not a lot of them. There's more than there used to be. I've seen a couple in my lifetime. I saw a pretty big one, which was pretty scary. Thank God it didn't see me. I don't want to deal with a bear. It wasn't a bear. This would have been a puppy next to this thing to begin with. It would have been a puppy. And this was a big black bear I've seen. And then what I saw and my other friends saw that night, that would have been a jalapeno popper for it to eat. It just missed the comparison. My dad just thought maybe we saw a black bear that maybe was mutated. There's also another part of Youngstown, Ohio. There's a state or I don't know if it's city or state park. It's called Mill Creek Park, and you can look that up. Mill Creek Park is a very big park, gorgeous, beautiful, natural area with tons of water and waterfalls and areas to go hiking and everything. And going through the Mill Creek Park is the Mahoning River. And the Mahoning River you can take from Mill Creek Park area and follow the Mahoning River all the way down into the area where the steel mills were. So this thing could have been up in that park area and could have followed the water. You always hear about these cryptids out there. It's keeping close to water. It could have just followed that Mill Creek Park area, and that it just went back and forth, and then we were in the area that night. And I've heard so many stories, especially about the Dogman and about a lot of them being around Indian burial grounds and things to do with burial grounds and things. And it makes you wonder, as big and as massive as the area of this steel mill area. Even, of course, even now it's even bigger. There has to be some areas that were just, some burial mounds, and some areas that were just, they built stuff over, and maybe that's why this thing was down there. We might have been around a burial mound, not even knew it. Who knows? I don't know, but so my dad, and it was really hard for me to accept, to hear him say, I don't, Matt, you didn't see that. Now, my best friend's dad, like I told you, was very involved with the city, gave us, without saying anything at first, the inclination that he knew what we were talking about, and that he did not jump to, nah, you guys didn't see that. He first and foremost went off. What are you doing going down there? Are you insane? The buildings are falling down. You could be killed. Things could fall on you. They mentioned the wild dogs. He actually mentioned a homeless person had been mauled to death by the wild dogs. And I've heard later in life that it could have been this, not the wild dogs. And he was extremely upset. And he said, I'm not speaking about this with you anymore. And he said, if you know what's good for you, he says, you're not going to talk about it too. Because number one, you guys are close with your classmates. If you go to your school and you talk about it, your classmates are going to want to go down there. People could fall. They could get killed. They could get hurt. And more than anything, if there's something down there, like a creature or something, you're going to get your friends hurt or maybe killed. So that's where he was aiming at first. Then he said, I've had enough talking about it. Don't ever let me hear. He says, I might be your dad to my best friend. He said, but I will see each one of you in juvenile hall. And I promise you, Matt, you won't play football next year. And they'll think you're all crazy. And he really laid it on us thick. Well, later that week, my best friend told me that he just every day just kept pounding his dad. How can you do this to me? How can you just look me in the eyes and tell me that I'm lying to you, or that I don't know what I'm talking? Finally, he broke down and he told me, he said to my best friend, he said, son, he said, I know exactly what you're talking about. He said, the officers know that they're down there. He said, they are down there. He said, we've gotten calls about these things. He says they've been seen by officers. We have reports about them. And he didn't say if, that is what killed one of those homeless people. He made a little inkling, kind of unspoken, about that one guy and the wild dogs. Think about it. People that worked on the railroad apparently had reported seeing something of the like, and very similar, and we saw some kind of giant kind of something that was on all fours, went up on the two legs, crawled into a building and disappeared, and it just so happened to be in that blast furnace area. So we didn't go back down there for years. My mom and dad are both gone. Like I said, my dad unfortunately passed away to pancreatic cancer. And when he was really sick at the very end, I'd say maybe about, 3-4 weeks before I lost my dad, I was sitting with him. It was my birthday, and I'm so glad I got to spend it with him. And I was talking to him, and I said, Dad, there's something I need to talk to you about. I said, you and I have discussed this subject about what me, and I mentioned my 4 friends and my 3 friends' names, the 4 of us. And I said, you've always told me you just think I saw a bear. I said, Dad, look at me. I said, you're talking to a grown man, your son, who is your best friend. We called each other best buddy because we were so close. I said, I'm your best buddy. You're my dad. So I need you to understand something from me. I said, this really happened to us. He said, I need you to understand, before you're gone, I need you to look at me and understand that this really went down. I need you to understand that that's what we saw. It wasn't a bear. said that these things really exist. And he'd been, as the years have been going by, he'd been, noticing how much I'd been researching things and watching things about Bigfoot and cryptids and things and UFOs, and of course the new UAP word for it and everything. And he started saying things to me more and more about, man, there's a lot of weird stuff really going on out there. I'm starting to think there really is some stuff. And he looked at me and he sat up and, he said, Matt, I'm sorry.
Take your time. And our condolences as well. This is really difficult.
Thank you. I'd give a minute for seeing him again. But for him to look at me and said, Matt, I believe you, was very powerful for me. And, and we went over the story again, and I told him everything. And he said, number one, thank God you're here. He said, I'm telling you, Matt. He said, Papa was there, his dad. I never got to meet my mom's mom, my dad's dad, or my mom's dad. They all passed before I was old enough to meet them. I met my dad's mother, my grandmother. But I didn't get to meet them. And he said, telling you right now, they were watching over you. And he said, you had many guardian angels watching over you, and that's why you lived. And he said, I believe you. And it was very powerful for me. And I needed that. I needed that before he left. And man, did that help me. And that has helped me make a lot of decisions as the years have gone by. And that's why I've been so involved in doing these interviews. And at first, when I started doing it, I would only say my name's Matt. I wouldn't give my last name. I wouldn't say where I was from or where I grew up, or I was very quiet and tight-lipped. And now I'm not, because you know what? These things really exist, and there's other things out there that I actually would like to see someday. I hope I get to keep seeing some different things. And like I said, I will be more than happy on a different show if you'd like to share my experience that happened a couple months ago in Beaver Creek. And I have actual proof. Even I have an EVP audio clip that I can give to you that will show you 100% proof of what I heard and what went down. It's really incredible.
I'm feeling very affected by this whole story. It's very traumatic, emotional, terrifying. It's like a horror story, like a movie. That you really lived. And you survived, which is fantastic, and I'm so glad.
I appreciate that. I've actually had quite a few people lately. I've started to thankfully meet people that are in TV and things like that. And I've had people ask me if I would like to be involved with some documentaries and maybe down the road a TV documentary or a movie or something. And I said exactly what I tell all of you is I'm obviously here first and foremost to tell my story because it happened and it's real. And I want to be a part of those groups of people that are not of the camps, the how you see all these people in a Bigfoot camp want nothing to do with the Dogman camp, and the Dogman camp people don't. No, everybody needs to help each other. Everybody needs to come in together because they're connected. I'm telling you, they're
100%.
connected. And it needs to be brought together, and I want to be a big part of that. And I'm doing this. Obviously, I'm not getting anything of it right now. I don't have my own channel yet. I'm not being paid for this. I'm doing this for nothing other than to share my story. And I'm sorry, I take that back, to share my experience.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to say that.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the respect that you guys showed me, and I appreciate all of the people that have showed me respect that I've already given on other shows. And the one thing I pride myself is that my mom and dad and they made something very apparent to their children is honesty is very important. And the type of person you are means everything. And I want to leave this world being known as somebody that was not a liar or somebody that made things up. Or, I want to be able to look back and say that I had some kind of effect on people finding out that there is this other world out there. They do exist. And that's why I'm doing it. thank you for having me on. And you guys need anything, you got my number. And I had
Awesome.
a
And thank you so much for, taking the time to be on our podcast. We greatly
Absolutely.
appreciate it, and you frightened the hell out of me.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. And that's a wrap on this rewind. Whether it's your first time hearing it or you're diving back in, these types of mysteries never get old. Now, got a favorite episode you want to hear again? Let me know. And always remember, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codegas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks, in the void of secrets a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the Codegas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit, through the darkness don't ever quit. In the Codex, the mysteries come, and always